Mental Health, the Up&Up. We're trying to make mental health care clear, helpful, and maybe even fun. We're chatting with licensed therapists, but this is not therapy. These are simply thoughts and ideas for you to discuss with your own therapist and to help you on your journey of complete wellness. Just in everyday life, I was listening to a podcast the other day where several of the speakers on the panel were talking about their life, their struggles, and it got into talking about mental health. And at least three of them mentioned that they went to try and get help from a therapist and were not only not helped, but were
Mhm.
told from the therapist basically, well, I can't help you. There's nothing we can do for you, which absolutely horrified me that three
Horrifies
individuals
you?
from very different walks of life, yeah, all had this experience of trying to seek help and not only not getting it, but kind of being dismissed and shoved off about it.
Mhm. Yeah, horrifies me as well. Should never happen, and reminds me of our discussion we had about like the why people don't do things that they know that they know would be helpful. Is those
Yeah.
therapists, again, don't know the exact story, but for some reason those therapists said, well, all the reasons I know about aren't working, so I probably there's nothing there. And they're like, no, there is something there. You just have to be curious and try to find it.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, bottom line, what I will end with, and hopefully say 18 times in the 10 minutes that we talk, if you are not feeling comfortable with a therapist, or you are feeling dismissed by a therapist, or for any reason that therapist isn't clicking with you, and if you do feel comfortable saying something to them, say something to them. If you don't, find another therapist. You know, I do this with
Absolutely.
customer service. Like if I call whatever, a store that I have a complaint about and the person is just not helping me, I'll hang up and call back, because the next person that answers is going to be a different person, and maybe they'll listen to me. So, yeah.
It definitely goes back to our first few podcasts where we were talking about when you go to therapy or in any relationship really, but especially if you're going and paying someone to help you,
Mhm.
you should feel seen, you should feel understood, and you should absolutely feel safe physically and safe emotionally talking about whatever you need to talk about.
Mhm.
And like you've said, it's not a clear process. It's not an easy process to deal with your life struggles and to unravel why you do the things you do or you think the things you think.
Mhm.
It's a very complicated process, and it's not going to be a super clear linear journey
Mhm.
toward getting better or getting healthier. But your therapist should absolutely know that, and they should be willing to work with you through even the rough points where you're not making progress. And if they're not,
Yeah.
absolutely a red flag to me.
100%. Yeah. I had early on when I first started my private practice, I had a referral from another therapist who sent a client to me. And in my fresh young days, I would always call the referral source and say, what worked, what didn't work, with the client's permission, of course. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that therapist said to me is, she will never change. And I was there like, are you kidding me? You're the instrument of change. The whole theory behind therapy is that people can change with the proper help and support.
Yeah.
And that client did change once her and I figured out again what the problem actually was, which that therapist had a different understanding of what the problem was. So of course the interventions weren't working. But
Mm-hmm.
even if they weren't working, what a horrible thing to say, to say, well, they'll never change. And this was a teenager. So it's like, oh my goodness,
Mm,
teenagers change every other day. Of course she's going to
right.
change, you know? So, no, that's definitely something that horrifies and bothers me.
And I understand that sometimes you're just not going to click with someone, or you're not going to be able to communicate with this person
Mhm.
well about a specific a subject. But over here, you find someone else that you can absolutely communicate with and be understood. And that is absolutely a thing. Personal experience and personal perspective does affect. But the like I say, in these specific cases, every single person, all three of these people, all sounded like they not only felt like they weren't connecting, but they weren't even being respected, and that was eye-opening in a very sad way.
Yeah. Some of the best people I know work in the mental health field, and quite honestly, some of
Yeah,
the worst people I know work in the mental health field. Not as many, thank goodness, but
yeah,
just because you're in a helping profession doesn't necessarily mean you are know how to help people or are even invested in helping people.
yeah. I've seen that
One
with
of the
teachers
reasons,
too.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I do think one of the roadblocks sometimes is that therapist's ego. Because I've actually had this happen with a medical doctor where I came with symptoms, and because the doctor couldn't figure out the symptoms,
Hmm.
basically said to me, and I think this was a quote, well, that's just not a thing. And they're like, well, I'm
My
experiencing it. I don't know what to tell you, you know.
my body's doing it, so you can't just say it doesn't exist.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just
Oh
not a
my
thing
gosh.
that, no, it's actually happening. And actually, with some more exploration, of course it was a thing. Once they
Right.
figured out what the thing was,
Yeah.
there was not only was it a thing, there was a solution. But yeah, to say that's not a thing.
It's the saving grace in this is to remember that therapists, doctors, teachers, they're all people too, and there are good ones and there are bad ones.
Hmm.
And our hope in making this channel is to help you understand that not everybody is that way, that there
Hmm.
are good people who do actually they went into this vocation because they want to help and they are willing to sit in the mud with you and work through it. Um,
Yeah.
so this kind of started on a low note, but I do want to be encouraging and help everybody understand. Like the whole reason
Yeah.
why you and I are such good friends is because we both are individual people with very different backgrounds who have come to this
Mhm.
understanding that it is vital that we as individuals go forward and try to be the best person that we can be every single day, and
Mhm.
that it is vital on a community level that if we have the ability to help someone else, that we are morally obligated to do so. This is something
Uh-huh.
that you and I have connected on a lot, and we're not the only ones.
Mhm.
We're a drop in the bucket, but we're not the only ones who feel this and who do want to help people. So this is not a
Yeah.
plug just of how cool we are, but we want to give you encouragement to keep seeking help and keep looking for good connection with friends, with family, with therapists,
Yeah.
because you do deserve it.
Yeah. And I'll just say a couple of final thoughts is one, when you and I are good friends. We do not always agree on things. Um,
Very
sometimes
true.
I'm going to tease you a little bit. Sometimes I look at you and go like, "What are you doing, Anna?" Not often, but sometimes. But it doesn't matter. It's not my life. You have different goals than
Right.
I do. I can respect your goals without agreeing with them. And you can
Exactly.
respect my goals without agreeing with them or even thinking they're silly from your perspective. But if they're
Right.
my goals, they're my goals. And therapists should also really understand that if you're having an issue with something, to not say, well, that's not a thing, or that's not a thing I can help you with. Because at the very
Something.
least, sorry, so at the
Go ahead.
very least, I compare therapy to doing detective work. if a detective walks into a room where there was a murder, whatever, I don't know why I went that far, and that detective said, I'm only going to look at the places in this room where there are clues, that's ridiculous. You don't know where the
Mm-hmm.
clues are. So
Mm-hmm.
if you look 3 places and don't find any clues, and you say, well, there must not be any clues here, that's not accurate. So a therapist can say, you know what, I'm looking around where usually there are clues, there aren't clues there, but let's look a little further because to see what we can find.
Yeah,
Because we don't know what we're going to find.
definitely.
Yeah.
You on the subject of not agreeing and just acknowledging each other's separate position while still respecting each other.
Uh-oh,
I
go ahead.
there have been no. There have been several times where you very graciously called me out on that, where I say something of, but that's just how life is. But that's just what anybody should
Ah,
do. And you're like, okay, from your perspective, yes. And
uh-huh.
yeah. And that
Yeah,
is, I think that is definitely vital for a therapist to be able to communicate that. Because even if for you that is absolutely right and wrong, and that is exactly how everybody should do it, it's common sense.
yeah.
Your therapist should be able to help you see that um, as a perspective point, not just anyway.
When I say those things to you, my struggle, and I think this goes along with sometimes when therapists say, well, I just can't help you, is I have such a high need, not need, I have such a high desire to help people that I
Mhm.
really want to jump in and say, no, Anna, here's the answer. No, I exactly know what to do. And number one, I don't because I don't live your life. And number two, you may not be at a space where you've even explained the whole situation
Yeah.
or are ready to hear a solution. But I do think a lot of people in the helping profession do have a need, desire, um, uh, way of thinking that they really want to help people. And when they
Hmm.
can't help people or feel they can't help people or believe they can't help people, that feels like can feel to them that they are not doing their job or they're not good at their job. And
Yeah.
most people don't want to feel that. It's a lot easier to kind of blame the patient or blame the client and say, well, they're just not helpable, you know,
Right.
because if it's easier to say that than to say they can be helped, I just don't know how to do it, you know.
Right.
But therapists should be, you know, uh, should know better than to not add more struggle to someone who's already struggling and
Hmm.
to kind of block that struggle and take some of it on themselves and sit with their own discomfort if they can't feel like they can help people rather than passing
Yeah.
that discomfort on to the person by saying that's just not a thing.
So, um, in the medical field, I've definitely run into doctors who I come in and I want to have a discussion with them about what my body's doing so I can understand and so we can make a plan of action. And that's my perspective coming into it. And I end up with these doctors who want me to come in and say, I'm having this problem. And they can say, oh, here's the solution. Boop.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, do you think that that ends up being a common problem in therapy as well? Or is it, hit or miss just like everything else?
I think some of it is hit and miss. I do know that they do um, address that in graduate programs, or at least they did in my graduate program. Unfortunately, I
Hmm.
don't think all graduate programs are equal, and some don't address that. But we address
Fair.
what's called like, well, there's different names for it, but basically not letting our needs or our ego get in the way of meeting respecting or meeting our clients' needs, so that if I'm
Mm.
uncomfortable or I feel ineffective or I feel like I can't help you, I feel incompetent, to not
Yeah.
pass that on to the client, to hold that into myself. So that's
Okay.
something that specifically therapists should be better at than the general population, because we study it and we acknowledge it and we develop strategies for it. That isn't to say that that everybody can do that, or that all therapists decide to do that or are able to do that. And I do
Mm-hmm.
think in the helping professions, there is a strong desire to fix the pain. Uh, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go back to something I may have mentioned before. It's one of my favorite quotes that I will misquote. But it's Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, who said something close to, when you cry, people have said forever, please don't cry. Not because they want you to feel better, but because they want themselves to feel better. And they're uncomfortable with your tears. So they're saying, please don't cry because I want to feel better. Instead of saying, I want you to feel better. Would that be sitting with you in your tears, or would that be distracting? What would make you feel better? But it's not about me feeling better. That
Mm-hmm.
solution isn't about me feeling better. For you to stop crying because that makes me feel better, is, to me, isn't respectful and isn't helpful. So, and
Definitely
again,
not helpful.
yeah, I do think therapists and doctors sometimes do need that. Please don't have that problem, because me realizing that I don't know how to help you is just too hard for me.
Yeah.
And in reality, sometimes we don't know right away how to help people. My mother had a phrase where she used to say, "Remember that doctors are practicing medicine." And it's
Fair
okay
point.
that,
Fair point.
yeah, they don't have all the answers. And kind of going back to that detective thing, just because you don't have the answer doesn't mean you stop looking.
Right. Well,
So,
hopefully this was encouraging and not just a bash session. I don't know what to call it,
right. And
but it's
I,
it's a topic that absolutely needs addressed.
yeah. And again, please, please, please don't give up on therapy. In general, if you have that experience, talk to another therapist, a different therapist, talk to other people who've been in therapy, to try to find a therapist who you feel respects you and realizes that, even if at first they don't know how to help you, we know that there's something out there that will help. And
Mm-hmm.
again, instead of passing that burden onto you, well, you're just going to have to suffer the rest of your life to at least keep that burden to themselves. I need to feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable that I wasn't able to help this person, but I'm not going to add any more stress to their lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, I, I I do think it's, horrifying, or whatever word we said, horrible, um, unfortunate, shouldn't happen. So keep looking. You'll find someone uh, who can help.
For more resources, shop at www.upandupwellness.com and hit that subscribe button. If you are in crisis and struggling right now, the national hotline is 988 and they can help you any time of the day or night.